This question came from a viewer who wants to be able to take a string of text from an Excel cell, split that string into multiple parts based on the position of a / character, and then write out the individual bits of text into different rows in the worksheet. So just to demonstrate the sort of thing we're going to do and demonstrate in this video, I've set up a basic example showing a list of the top 10 highest grossing films and a list of the genres to which those films belong. So each genre is separated with a / character, and if I click the Split Strings button, we'll get that list of values split out onto multiple different rows without overwriting any of the existing data in the worksheet. So that's what we'll demonstrate in this video. To get started, I've created my list of the 10 highest grossing films. Most of this data is just copied from Wikipedia's list of the highest grossing films, although I've only gone for the top 10 rows. That'll be more than enough to demonstrate the technique we need to use. I've also added an extra column for the list of genres, and I've added multiple genres for each film, separated with a / character. I've made an exact copy of sheet 1 because I'm going to want to test a couple of things as I go along, and I wanted a quick, convenient way to get back to the original set of data that I created. I've saved this as a macro-enabled workbook, and I'll stick a link in the video description just in case you wanted to download this so you've got the exact same data to work with. And having done all that, I'll head over to the Developer tab, open up the Visual Basic Editor, insert a new module into the project, and then create our first subroutine. Let's call this something like split string. For the first example, I'd like to take the contents of cell C2 on sheet 2 and break that single string of text into 3 separate parts based on the position of the / characters. This part's actually really simple because there's already a function in VBA that will do this for us. It's called split. And the split function returns an array of the individual substrings based on the delimiter character that you specify. So here's what we're going to do. Back in the VB editor, we'll need something in which we can capture the results of this function. So we need to declare an empty array first of all. So I'm going to say dim, and let's give it a descriptive name. Let's say genres as variant. The as variant part is optional there. You can just say dim genres and that will give you the empty array that you need. But I always like to be clear about my intent when declaring variables. So dim genres as variant is what I'll go for. I can then specify a value for the genres array by saying genres equals, and then refer to the split function. If I then open up some round brackets, you'll see there's a number of parameters. We're going to specify just the first 2 parameters. We're going to say sheet2.range, c2.value, that's the string that will split, and then the delimiter character will be a / character in some double quotes. The limit as long as the number of results you want to return. It has a default value there of -1, which just means it will return all of the substrings. And then the compare mode is based on whether you want to use a case-sensitive or a case-insensitive search. And in this case, it's irrelevant because you can't have an uppercase / character, so we don't need to worry about those. Having done that, I'm just going to use the F8 key at this point to step through this procedure. And you'll see that I've got my empty array sitting in the locals window at the moment. If you haven't got the locals window displayed, you can use the view menu to display it. And then when I hit the F8 key on this line, you'll see that I've created my empty array, or populated my empty array with 3 different values: science fiction, action, and adventure. So I'll just press F8 then to end the subroutine, and then we can work out what we can do with that array. To list out the contents of the array, we can count through the individual elements and then write their values into the immediate window. To do that, we'll need a variable that we can use as a counter, so I'm going to say dim I as integer. And then after we've populated the array, we can say for I equals, and then the array that we've created will have its first element numbered from 0, so I can say 0, 2, and then if I knew that there were going to be 3 elements in the array, in this case, I could enter the number 2. There, so that would count to 0, 1, 2. If I'm not sure how many elements I'm going to have in the array, and bear in mind that each of our films has a different number of genres to which it belongs, then we can use a function to calculate the highest numbered element of the array. So that function is called ubound, and then to that we can pass in the name of our array, which is genres, and that will count through to the highest numbered element in the first dimension of the array. I can close off the loop by saying next I, and then simply say debug.print genres, and then refer to the integer variable to return the value of that numbered element. So if I use the F8 key to step through, we'll populate the array. We get all 3 elements populated, numbered 0, 1 and 2. And then when we process our loop, we'll see those individual values being printed out into the immediate window, one by one, until we've finished looping through the elements. Next, I'd like to write out the contents of the array into cells in the worksheet. So I'd like to see science fiction, action, adventure listed out from cell C2 moving downwards. So I'll get science fiction in cell C2, action in cell C3, and adventure in cell C4. To do that, I'm going to change my debug.print statement, and I'm going to start by referencing the cell that I've just taken the values from. So that's going to be sheet2.range C2. And then to avoid having to write a separate individual statement for each value I want to write out, I'm going to use the offset property to work out how many rows down I need to move from cell C2. For the first value, I want to move 0 rows down. Unfortunately, that's the value that will be held in the integer variable the first time I process this loop. The second time round, that will be 1, and the third time round, that will be 2. So I'll offset the appropriate number of rows down just by using that same variable. I don't want to offset any columns, so I'll just type in a comma followed by a 0, and then type in a full stop and set the value of that cell to be equal to the value of that element of the array. Now you can probably spot a fairly obvious problem at this point. This is not going to shift down the other films in the list, but just to demonstrate that it will work at this point, roughly speaking, if we start processing our loop, we'll see the individual contents of that array replacing the contents of cells C2, C3 and C4. Okay, at this point I'm just going to go back and copy and paste my original genres into those 3 cells again. So back to sheet 1, and I'll just copy those first 3 cells, head back to sheet 2 and then paste those in. The thing that I need to do next, of course, is make sure that I've got enough space to write out the individual genres that I've copied into the array. So to do that, imagining I'm starting with cell C2, I'll have populated an array with 3 elements, and the upper bound numbered element of that array will be numbered 2. So remember, it's based from a 0. So from the cell that I've just taken the contents from, I'm going to move down 1 row. Then I'm going to expand my range by a number of rows equal to the highest numbered element of my array. So that will be 2 rows for the first example there. So that would give me those 2 rows selected. I then want to highlight the entire row that those 2 cells belong to. And then I want to insert some cells. And if I do that, that will insert the correct number of rows required to populate the cells with the contents of the array. So all we have to do now is translate all of that into VB code. So let's just get rid of those extra blank rows there. Head back to the Visual Basic Editor and look at how we can implement that in our VBA code. After I've used the split function to populate the genres array, I'm going to say sheet2.range C2 and start by offsetting 1 row down from there. So offset 1, 0. Then I want to resize the cell that I've landed in by the number of rows that's equal to the upper bound element of the genres array. So I'm going to use the resize method, or the resize property at this point, and set the row size to be equal to ubound genres. What I then want to do is refer to the entire row that those cells belong to, so .entire row, and then simply use the insert method to insert the required number of rows. So having done that, if I just restore down the VB editor window again and use the F8 key to step through, we should find that this time we insert the required number of rows before we start writing out the values, and then the individual contents of the array get written out into those new empty cells. Okay, let's reset the worksheet again. I'm just going to delete those extra 2 rows that have been inserted, head back to sheet 1, grab the list of genres for the first film, and then paste those into cell C2 there. Okay, we could have written some code to do that, of course, to reset the worksheet, but I wanted to focus on what we're attempting to achieve with this video. So the next step is to basically get that set of actions to be repeated for each of the individual films in the list. We have a few options for how we could do that, But I'd like to handle the possibility that not every single film will belong to multiple genres. There might be some cells that don't have any / characters in them. So what I'd like to do is start from cell C1 and then use the find method to look in the block of cells all the way down to the end of the existing list. And it will find the first cell after cell C1 that contains a / character. Carry out that set of actions, so it will then insert a bunch of extra rows, and then from that position it will find the next cell that contains some / characters, and then repeat the process. It's going to carry on doing that until it can't any longer find any / characters in that block of cells. So to make that work, let's head back to the Visual Basic Editor, maximize the window again, and look at how we can add the code to do that. To begin, I'm going to declare a variable which can capture the result of the find method, and the find method returns a reference to a range object, so I'll say dim r as range. Then I can set r to be equal to the result of the find method applied to the column of values in column C. So I'll say sheet2.range C1, comma, sheet2.range C1.end XL down. I can close two sets of parentheses then and apply the find method to that block of cells, open up some more parentheses and then look at which parameters I need to fill in. Well, the what parameter is compulsory, so let's set that one first. I'll use a space underscore to head down to the next line and say what : equals, and then in some double quotes type in a / character. The second parameter I'm going to pass a value to is the lookat parameter. So this one specifies whether you're matching part of the string or all of the string. In this case, obviously the cell contents only has the / character in part of the string. There is no single cell which has just a / character in it. So I'm going to say lookat, and then it would be helpful if we got a bit of prompting there, but it's XL part to find a partial match. What we can then do is check whether the find method has returned anything or not. And if the find method doesn't return anything, the value of r will be equal to nothing. So I only want to proceed with the next section if not r is nothing, then. So I'll write that if statement at the beginning of this block of code, highlight all of that, indent it one space with the tab key, and then say end if right at the end there. So within that if block, I then want to start looping through all of the other cells which contain a / character. So I'm going to begin a do loop just before my splitting of my string. So I'm going to say do, and then after I've finished processing that array, I'm going to use a loop while not r is nothing. So basically continue going while you still continue to find a / character. I'm just once again going to highlight and then indent all of that code inside the do loop. Of course, we need to make sure that we do attempt to find the next cell before we loop back to the top. So just before the loop line, we're going to say set r equals, and then to avoid writing all of this out again from scratch, I'm just going to copy and paste the reference to that block of cells. Everything from the top of column C to the last populated cell in column C. And then rather than applying the find method, we're going to apply the FindNext method. So the FindNext method will continue a find that you've originally begun with the find method. There's one optional parameter we can specify. It's the range after which we want to begin searching again. So I want to begin searching after the cell that we have just found, so I can pass in a reference to my r variable. A couple of last things to change then. Of course, we're not referencing this specific cell anymore, sheet2.range C2. So anywhere where I've referenced that specific range, I want to replace that with a reference to my r variable. So that's split r.value. Then it's r.offset resize. And then within this FindNext loop, it's not sheet2.range C2.offset, it's r.offset from there. So there we go, that's the entire loop constructed. If I just restore down the VB window again and then use the F8 key to begin stepping through. So it appears that we have found a cell containing a / character. So we're going to enter this if statement and then enter our do loop. So this first one is going to split the contents of that original cell into its 3 component parts. So we should see, beg your pardon, in the locals window we get science fiction, action, adventure. Then we insert the required number of blank rows and then process our list of genres and write those into the available cells, and then attempt to find the next cell containing a / character after the original one that we found. So have we found another cell? We'll find out if we loop back to the top. We have indeed. So we've now split the genres into another list. So that's action, adventure, superhero this time. And we insert the required number of rows and then write out the individual contents. And you can carry on using the F8 key as much as you like for this basic example until you get bored, basically, at which point you can simply hit the F5 key to run all the way through to the end of the procedure and find all of your results written out into the required empty cells. One important thing to note about the FindNext method is that it will continue to loop around the range of cells you've specified, continuing to find values even if it's already encountered those cells before. We don't need to worry about that in this particular example because we're removing the values that our find method is trying to find. So when it gets back to the top of the list, there are no more / characters to find. If you're finding values and then not removing the things you're looking for, a simple technique to avoid getting into an endless loop here is to capture the address of the first cell that you found. So a quick way to do that back in the VB editor. If I declare another variable, let's say something like dim first cell ref as string, and then assuming that we have found something here, we can say first cell ref equals r.address. What we would then want to do is continue looping while r is not nothing and r, or the address of r, is not our first cell ref. So this little loop here needs an additional check. We can add an AND operator to the while statement and say AND r.address is not equal to first cell ref. Okay, so just in case you end up in an endless loop if you're not removing the values that your find and FindNext methods are looking for. So that's the basic system set up. At this point, it's just a case of adding some finishing touches to wrap up the video. The first thing I'll do is just comment out the additional condition I've added to my loop while line. Of course, this is only important, as I said, if you're not removing the value that your find and FindNext methods are looking for. If we are removing those values, then that check will cause us a bit of a problem because we'll be trying to reference an object which doesn't exist. So if we try to find the next / character, but there isn't one to find, then the r variable will hold nothing, so therefore we can't reference the address property of it. So let's just comment that out for now. Then let's add a subroutine to quickly reset the contents of sheet 2 so we can test this multiple times and maybe try editing our code a little bit to try out some different techniques. So we'll have a separate subroutine. Let's create one at the bottom of the module. Let's call it something like reset sheet 2. And we'll start by clearing the contents of the region of range A1 on sheet 2. So we'll say sheet1.range, sheet 2.range A1.current region.clear. So we'll remove everything from the entire table to which cell A1 belongs. And then I can refer to sheet 1, I do mean sheet 1 this time, .range A1.current region. And then I'm going to use the copy method on that. And then I'm going to specify the optional destination parameter as sheet2.range A1. So having done that, I'm going to then head back to sheet 2 in Excel. and I'm going to draw a basic form control button to attach that subroutine to. So I'll draw a button somewhere towards the top of the worksheet. If you want your buttons to line up exactly with the edges of cells, just hold down the Alt key while you click and drag with the mouse, and very satisfyingly you'll find your buttons snap to the edges of cells when you draw them. I can then assign the Reset Sheet 2 macro to that. Let's add some basic text to this. Let's call it something like Reset. And then we can click away from the button, and then the next time we click on the button, it will reset that sheet to the original contents. Let's do something similar then to split our genres. Let's insert a new button using the Form Controls section. Hold down the Alt key to draw our button, snapping it to the edges of cells. Assign the split string method to that. And then let's just change the text on there so it says something like split genres. And again, we can click away from the button and then click on the button to split out our list, reset the worksheet, split the list again. Hours of fun resetting and splitting your list. So I hope at least part of that's been useful. I think it answers the original question at least. So yeah, I'm sure it will need a bit of modification to work with the original questioner's system, but I think you can probably take it from there yourself. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.